Welcome to the Changing Shapes podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Tim Weinheimer, and I really resonated with your caring approach to life and business, the way that you champion innovation with integrity, your focus on projects with positive impact, and the fact that you work with eclectic teams. And so, Tim, to kick things off, could you give us and our listeners a quick snapshot of your journey, maybe just a bit about who you are, the kind of work that you do, and what you're passionate about these days?
Absolutely. Well, Thomas, I am delighted to be here. Glad that you reached out to me. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Han. We're based in beautiful Austin, Texas. We are a small, mighty firm. We're 44 people, distributed workforce. We've got folks from Seattle to Mexico City and everywhere in between. A little bit about the agency. I think what makes us unique is we are very focused on mission of predictive marketing communication. That means is we have invested in data to really try to use it right, use it well, use it to help our clients really predict their next move. So with our focus in just a few categories, energy, health and wellness, food and beverage, we really get to dial in on how we use data for servicing these clients. A little bit about me. I'm a long time agency guy, although too long at this point, Thomas. I hopefully semi-retired next year or the next. I've had what I would say is this incredibly charmed life in agency world. And that means I got the chance to learn from the absolute best people in the business. I spent time early years in Dallas at the Richards Group, learning from the master, Stan Richards, who is still with us. Then that made my way into sort of the bigger agency world of Ketchum and McCann Erickson and Bruner and Pittsburgh. And all that to say, the whole journey was more about being comfortable with being curious. I, for some reason, was the person that just raised my hand when no one knew what to do with a website, email, social media, programmatic ad buying. I was the idiot that just said, let's go figure it out. A lot of stuff we learned along the way.
Amazing. I wanted to touch on your work and leadership because I was really struck by the book that you wrote, The Giving Will, where you said at the beginning that you had to sit with being described as one of the most caring people that your friend knew. And from what I've read, I think it's not just that friend. I think it's the same quality you bring to leadership. Would you say that's an accurate? Have I perceived that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. That was a interesting genesis for that. It was at the very beginning of Chat GPT. I was on vacation with my husband in Mexico, and I was thinking if there's one thing I could do with Chat GPT, why don't I have a conversation about the most basic fundamentals of giving? Um, I had bigger aspirations probably at the time of doing something with AI or making a tool that would help you find um, what I call sort of instant moments of need in around the neighborhood that you could give and contribute in any way possible. That's still sort of in the back of my head. Maybe the giving level. Yeah, it just felt like this tiny little bit of white space to have a few weeks, maybe a month conversation, shape it into something useful, publish it.
While reading it, it really takes the pressure off of the type of giving that people can provide, because I think you also touch on in the book of how, it doesn't have to be financial. And I think there's always this pressure of like, do I have that capability? But actually finding those spaces where you can be giving and caring in your day-to-day life and finding it through paths of gratitude. I really like, and I can see how through a conversation with GPT, sort of these things can come out. I mean, at least how I think, I like to think in reflection with something. And yeah, I thought it was a really beautiful piece to kind of both take the pressure off as well as empower to make some steps to add more caring into one's life. And yeah, I could really sense that you live that. For example, one of my first bosses, Elle Bembridge, she was one of the most caring people out there, and she would spend a huge amount of her time and then have to stay late to help the people that were working for her. And she was one of the people who shaped the most the way that I work. And but I've also found that having this kind of caring disposition isn't always easy in a highly competitive space. What's your personal method of how you bring those two things together, the caring while also being successful in a competitive space?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I feel like I've always been a big believer in the Franklin Covey principles of time management. They've been around for decades, really, at this point. But they always talked about what was called the PDTL, the prioritized daily task list. And the thing about that was what stuck with me is that notion of just that one small thing can make just a really big difference, which kind of goes back to the premise of the giving will. In my day to day now, it is more difficult as in a distributed workforce to, I think, find these quality connections, these high touch moments. Just one example this morning. So we have an upstairs, a downstairs with all sorts of seating. We have this wonderfully talented young fellow who's a visualization designer. Um, but I was just sitting here cranking away on stuff. I thought, I know he's downstairs. He's brand new to this world. I need to go down, stop what I'm doing, and go check in on him and just see what's exciting to him, what's not exciting to him. How is he doing? Is he lost? Is he getting good direction? That just doesn't happen very often. And so many times, I think where we are is as an agency, you're probably using Slack and corporations using Slack all the time. It's just one platform, but boy, at the end of the day, you're not sure that I was successful there or not because it's just a bunch of writing emails and messages for a living. Whereas if you kind of snap in between all of that, uh, it's these better moments to connect and really know somebody's birthday or know what they might be dealing with the kids or whatever it might be. Your day will be so much better. Just one, really, just one thing. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I resonate with that. And I mean, we're a remote first agency, and finding those moments to make sure that we're still humans doing something. So to keep that humanity is not always super easy. And yeah, Slack doesn't necessarily, sometimes it does, but usually it's not the most straightforward way how to have those connecting moments and showing that we are all still human, and we're sort of creating something together as people.
Yeah. Yeah. Our HR director, wonderful guy, John, he will always start any training or presentation. He reminds us that almost 100% of the time, people are coming at you with positive intent. Or if you're not, you should be the one delivering things with positive intent. Um, Having no idea what's on the receiving end of what it's sending, but positive intent is often his message, and you don't always hear that from HR either. So
That's I love that framework or that perspective of how to take things on and to actually say it out loud is, yeah, that's really great.
yeah,
In terms of connecting, and maybe not just on a personal level but also on a work level, do you find that AI has helped in a specific way of connecting with cross-disciplinary teams? So by that I mean I've found in our work that I'm able to understand a bit better what a backend developer is actually doing because I could play around with it. Not in it by any means that I'm successful at doing their work, but it at least sort of allowed me to kind of peer through the door and play around with some backend features and accessing APIs, which I hadn't done before. But I'm like, oh, okay, so now I know at least roughly what that person's day looks like and what they're doing to have a different type of conversation. Have you found something like that in that AI has allowed for to connect differently with your teams?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We actually took a little bit different approach. So this is probably already probably 3 years ago. We went to sort of the human side of things. We created an AI task force that cut across teams and cut across, I would say, generations. And that the purpose of that is that they were as humans and team members by design, they were going to do exploration together. So the use of tools, the testing of tools, the understanding of things that would work best for us and for our clients. We tried to make it out of the gate a very high touch experience for that group um, to do so. Then that led us to, with our clients, we really went, I'd say, analog AI. We created what we call the AI hackathon. And so clients come in, it's in person, it's facilitated by the data team and the creative team. So here again, you've got like AI, high knowledge, high awareness, not as much high usage and awareness with the creative team, and they work together to with the clients to actually build ad campaigns using AI tools. So the whole goal was this sort of hybrid human AI and not just a bunch of people hacking and clicking into AI for quick fixes, but really problem solving together with the hackathon. It's been pretty cool. It's been pretty fun. It's an all day event, and it's worth it.
Wow. That's so interesting. So you would have basically been using the AI to sort of more quickly prototype and see results and kind of get more real time things to visualize and actually, rather than just talking about it, to actually be able to point at things and respond to the things that are coming out of the hackathon. Is
Yeah,
that
and then
right?
at the latter iterations of it, the team actually created 100. The rule was 100% created ad campaign. So video, copy, images, voiceover, and then at the end they had 15 minutes to present to a panel of judges. So again, we go back to sort of analog. They still have to be able to present well and pitch and talk and dialogue, but it was really fun. And then there's a winner in the contest. But really fun.
That's really cool. And I like the collaborative, I'm assuming it sounds like actually being in a room approach with that, because I find for me there's this juxtaposition between AI's speed, which is great because you can do things very quickly, but then there's the almost stands in opposition of caring and doing things carefully. And so I can see how actually being in a room, having those judges and having that feedback between people allows for that bit of friction to be there so that the human side still comes in. So it's not this thing of, oh, just write me a copy for this thing, but it's actually being worked on collaboratively with just the right amount of friction to make the speed useful. Does that sound like is that a
Absolutely.
way how
And
you would add
again,
friction?
that's exactly it. And again, with any great campaign, did they create an emotional connection with the judges? So, did the judges laugh? Did the judges smile? Did the judges wince at the work that was presented? So that it wasn't just this very factory produced AI product and creative, but something that actually, with the human presentation and the interaction, actually got a response is the key thing.
That is really inspiring to hear. I love it because yeah, I wanted to talk to you because obviously, I mean, I saw that you wrote the Robot Apocalypse, I think it was in 2018. I couldn't find it, so I didn't get a chance to read it. But it sounded really interesting. But I guess it's safe to say that based on the title, that you've been tech forward for a long time, and in your introduction as well, that you've been kind of looking at the sort of cutting edge technology in your work for a long time. So I've been keen to talk to you about exactly this, about how you kind of approach these things. And I mean, when you see these judges see it and also in campaigns, where do you feel we are, maybe not just as people who are using AI in our work, but also in terms of public perception of the hype cycle that we're in right now? And maybe also a sort of in the trust cycle. What's your feeling on that? Because I have a lot of opinions, but I'm yeah still looking to see where we are because
Yeah.
it seems to differ across a lot of people too.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm delighted that you found the robot apocalypse. It was the robot apocalypse, how brains survive and thrive in the age of AI. 19 eons ago in the world of AI, which is probably long dead or been taken down. I'd have to go back and even find it myself. Yeah, I think it's more about the evolution of technologies, right? So I'm a bit older than you, and I've sort of lived the dot-com days in the late 90s. Boy, all the headlines and stories around that. And then the digital revolution, marketing, media, onslaught of social media, all of these things in sort of 10 or 20-year cycles. I think we're just in that next cycle. Lots of hype, zillions of tools to choose from. My favorite are the new tools that actually help you with GEO, generative engine optimization. You can buy a subscription. We've seen this model a zillion times with SaaS. It's $99, it's $500 a month, and it will tell you what your brand needs to do to win on GDO. Um, I think it'll always come down to um, the hype, and then it'll sort of narrowcast into the winners, those that have proved themselves with the best features, functionality, safety, security, etc., and have the right backing and the right models. I think also the willingness to continually evolve and improve and perfect the product the same way Amazon has been built over the last 30 years. It's just sort of that they've made that commitment to making it better versus being just a hype cycle flash in the pan, quick money maker.
There's so much content online now, right? But with generative AI systems now, it's gone from being so cheap that it just costs somebody's time to it can just now be churned out with as long as we have energy. And there's a part of me where I feel that with the increase of just pure content and as it keeps getting better, what is it going to do to how we perceive things that we see online? And I think different people might react differently to it. And I think I'm pretty sensitive to it, but I have fallen for some AI content for a second before I always second guess and see like, what's my sense of, double check sources and things like that. But I think people will get burned by seeing things that they don't know if they can trust it. But it seems like most of us are still in the point where we're still trying to feel it out and we need to just have it around us for a while. Is that what you're perceiving in terms of how you're communicating to brands? Or, I think you might have a very different view on it than I do.
That's a really good question. I think in my mind, I think we will start to see what I probably call bot blindness. And you may have recalled everything used to be a banner ad. There was banners this, banners that, and just the web was just flooded with fake banners. And there became a thing called banner blindness. And nobody saw those ads, and it was just waste, like a wasteland of digital ads. I kind of sense that we as humans will run into the same thing here, where we have our limits, just our human limits, and sort of things that we can do in a day. I always say that multitasking is one of the biggest myths ever because you're never going to do anything well multitasking, and there's countless studies on it. So I think the similar principles, maybe, of what can and will happen, where it's just too much or it's just so unauthentic. It's just sort of humans will see through that, or they'll just challenge it to be the absolute best it can be to a point of acceptance.
Hmm. Yeah, that's hopeful. I recently was listening to one of the podcasts that was much more dystopian on the hard fork podcast. The recent one was a bit more doom and gloom. So I appreciate the more hopeful view, and I can see that analogy between just that human sense of you can just feel it, even if you don't know it necessarily consciously. And I think for me, it often just loops back around to care, like producing with care. And if you're co-producing like you do with AI and you give it that care and that friction and you're working on it to create a feeling, then it'll always automatically be perceived as you can sense that it was produced that way, even if it might not be something you could write on a list, which is probably a good thing. So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
helpful.
There is there's an organization in your neck of the woods. It's AI for Good. And I spent a fair amount of time last year just following and reading and learning. But I think there are actually several other places, and I think there's even hashtag AI for Good. I think it's important for us to, just the same way we seek out our passions through different media channels or influencers, whether it's sports or music or entertainment. I think as professionals, I would encourage people in this line of work to also seek out those AI for good resources and those people that are out there. You know, way back, it was sort of Bill Gates was more positive, I believe, on the AI, and Elon Musk was more negative on AI. So you kind of always got to find your own homework. And I think it's more about seeking out the sources that are surfacing the good and breakthroughs in research and behaviors and solving problems and whether it's poverty, crime, whatever. I think those are the things that you want to go read about and maybe tune out some of this other junk.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in that line, in terms of using AI in this positive way, is there a sort of differentiation of how you suggest your clients work with AI based on the work that they do? So I know that you do a lot of work with public health and nonprofit and things that have a positive impact. Do you sort of brief them to maybe do these workshops slightly differently? And I say in the context of, for us, when we build a fitness tool, our approach is very different to if it's a public health assessment tool, where we just think about it differently and brief the clients differently to sort of what to look out for, and what error tolerance there is and how people can respond if they're not sure about what they're hearing. It's obviously worlds of difference between the two. So I was wondering, since you're, I guess, using the AI more behind the scenes in what you produce, is there a difference there because it's how people perceive it if they have that sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with clients, it's more about making sure there's a clear objective, measurable objective, or research objective, whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. I think we always want to make sure that we understand that first. Because the second thing we want to take a look at is what is the data that's available, either client data, their first party data, or second data, research data, and federal government data. There's all sorts of data sources. So objective and then the data. So in that, what we call the 3D model data design delivery. That first step is, I think if we get those two things correct and in agreement, then the application AI really steps in. So a good example of this was probably about a year ago. Client that's a large commodity here in Texas. They have for about 15 years been running a program with a small fleet of people out speaking to medical professionals, doctors, physicians, nutritionists, etc. They've run the program for 15 years and they said, is this still worth it? Should we still be knocking on doors? And we said, gosh, okay, what's the objective? What data do you have? Well, they had almost all of their 15 years of data of this sort of traditional knocking on doors and what sort of metrics they were. Long story short, we were able to actually ingest all of that data and put it with our data team, our NLP specialists, and go back to the client 6 weeks later after that and say, yes, your program is successful because it's changing behaviors. It's creating preference for their commodity, which happens to be beef. And it's educationally serving them in the state of Texas. So um, I just use that as an example because it was sort of it served the many masters. It served the client. It's good for the professionals. And ultimately, it's good for the public to know that their program is doing what it's designed to do. But I think had we not had AI, there's no way we could have given them an answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just because of the sheer volume of How did you say
volume.
15 years of wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm impressed that they kept all that.
Yeah, I know. That's like it's you must have been super thrilled to know that okay, we can actually go so far back in time to and mine this for further information. That's a gold mine. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And so speaking of actually reviewing data, I understand that is also a big part of your job and you've always been very data driven. I've been exploring ways how interacting with now not just generative AI, but generally with AI that go beyond the sort of now very familiar chatbot interface. And both personally, I'm interested in how we as people interact with these tools as well as for our clients. Do you have a view on what alternative modes of interaction we could or should be developing, and not us personally, but just as a people working in the space and how they could change the way that we work?
Yeah. I'm now the guy that just has like the crazy idea, and then I get to call the smart and the data people, data scientists, and say, "What do you guys think about this?" I think if we take that back one step, our teams, whether they're strategy, account service, paid video, research, whatever their role is, we're getting them trained up to ask better questions. So if they're asking better questions, then they're also getting in front of a client with potentially better solutions that include some form of AI. So, kind of goes back to the objective example I shared earlier, but the same thing when you asking better questions. A recent success at the beginning of the year that we're very proud of is this purposeful use of the AI happening with one of our clients that's in healthcare. So when healthcare companies do open enrollment or it's in the US, um, you get a massive flood of inbound calls, right? Members or patients or customers, and the idea of people being logged jammed on wait list and they're sitting for 20 minutes, possibly longer, waiting to get to the right person. That's difficult for the customer, and it's extremely difficult for the provider or the healthcare plan provider. So the team just asking the right questions, spotting the problem, something we would have never done just 2 years ago. They were actually able to use the client data to build a custom bot that handle all of these inbound requesting queries. And it's pretty common. I think we now see it in the airlines, we see it in financial institutions. But I was proud that we were actually able to just truly apply AI in a business case, use super useful way. That was a win for the client and a win for us, and almost more of a technology relationship now that's changed within. We have plenty of clients that we've had as website clients and do, WordPress work all day long. And now we're doing these AI solutions projects. And that that's the really rewarding piece of it because truly every single person in that equation is winning. The patient, us, the client, it's just better.
That's really great, and I think the stakes in that situation are so high where if it's just I mean it's important with airlines and customer service too that you're not wasting your time on hold, but in this kind of a situation the amount of improvement is vast. And yeah, I know a friend of mine, they're working in a stealth startup doing something similar where they're helping in this kind of situation to provide it as a service. And yeah, the areas in life and especially in medicine, it's gotten so bureaucratic. I think globally, I mean, I know for sure here in Germany and the UK where I lived, and I think from what I hear in the States as well, just the amount of paperwork that
Mm.
and the time dedication that medical staff spend on paperwork versus what they could be doing helping patients is also immense. So I think it's a super fascinating space to look at. Whereas also there's the privacy concerns too. So it's a really interesting space to navigate how and to see how it'll be evolving.
Yeah, for
But yeah,
sure.
really cool to be involved in it. Looking more broadly to cultural shifts, kind of looking ahead, do you see cultural shifts that you anticipate through maybe, AI driven personalization or these AI tools, but, even anything else like AR, VR, or other technologies that you might have on your radar as they kind of become more and more embedded into normal everyday life? Is there something that you're keeping an eye on that you see making bigger cultural shifts at the moment?
There's a few things that are really fascinating to me. I think when we've all talked about personalization for forever, really, since the days of direct mail, but it became email and personalization, and some brands like American Express, they get it, they do it so well. So I think now that we've sort of evolved, um, and now with AI, I'm mostly fascinated to see what's really going to happen with personalization. There are personal bots out there. There are very expensive, bots you can buy, like a butler type of thing for yourself. But I think it's going to move from this sort of one way Siri ask me a question kind of thing. And same thing with ChatGPT has changed the prompt engineering world. That conversational personalization, I just think that's going to be incredible. Um, that's sort of a broad answer, but I think that's one area. I think the other thing, it's always talked about at conferences like South by Southwest here in Austin, but gesture technology. Languages are still very different. Unfortunately, a little bit flattening to English across the world, which I'm not a big fan of. But but I think gesture technologies is another area where human connection through gesture technology can probably accelerate connections and community. I'm hoping, but
Hmm.
that's sort of a stretch. I remember there's a big topic probably 3 years ago at South and stuff.
Okay. Can you say more? I have to say I know nothing about gesture technology.
Yeah, so if you're like me, I talk with my hands a lot, or your eyes, or facial expressions, or um, when some people in some cultures are shaking their head in a meeting, they are agreeing. But in other cultures or meetings or even gender identity, you're actually saying yes. So sometimes this is yes, and sometimes this is just I'm agreeing, and sometimes this is I'm listening.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a different form of language, and it's probably just a weird nerding thing that I think is cool. But I'm kind of curious where that's going to go, and it kind of feeds in with personalization too, because if AI is making the world a little more personal, is the understanding of what someone is doing with something going to get better as well to connect you instead of separating.
Huh, interesting. I see. Yeah. No, that's really fascinating. And do you find the personalization aspect, like, does anything concern you there? Or are you quite optimistic about how it's evolving? Because again, we are in this hyped cycle at the moment. There's also, in the news, and I mean, I was listening to, what was it? The Science Versus podcast, where we're talking about chatbots as companions that can sometimes be useful and interesting and sometimes helpful in with psychology chatbots that actually do help people measurably, but then it could go sideways. But it's also because it's new technology that gets overhyped. And I sort of, depending on which podcast and which day I'm listening to, my mood about it swings vastly on a day-to-day basis. So I was just wondering what your take on it is with, since you communicate with your clients to a lot of people, how do you see the personalization? Do you see that as a good thing? Is it something you think, is important to look out for?
Yeah. I think we all know the one thing the technology will never have is the rational mind. The centuries the changes and the evolution, it all comes to being able to be um, rational, emotive triggers, all of those things that um, in our lifetime won't be replaced. But I think it's just the ability to know me and know me well enough that it just also gives me what I'm looking for in a very personal way. And maybe a good, I don't know if it's a good example. I don't know if you use Spotify. Spotify, you know, for a while they've had the DJing, and you can go to the DJ, and in the last year, I'm like, okay, that DJ knows me really well. And it's what's great about it is the DJ could have boxed me into a very obvious form, but it has not done that. And it actually is sort of, it'll open my eyes to something I wasn't aware of, an artist or even an old song that I haven't listened to in a long time. Somehow it's just striking the right chord. And I don't know, maybe that's a good example of a small way that some things are getting more personal.
I love that. You remind me that I need to try it again. I need to see how it is because in my case, I also listen to my son's kids' music through my Spotify. So I wonder if it's able to distinguish what's
Yeah.
actually my taste versus what's his. But yeah, well, I'll report back. I'll give it a try and report back how it went.
Yeah. Check it out. I think it's pretty incredible. It doesn't always get it right, but it does get the, and that's
Yeah.
what's fascinating. I just can't imagine sitting in the room at Spotify and what those product engineers are learning and discussing to make it personal. Yeah.
Mm. So on this sort of personalization and personal note on social media, it's something I want to ask you about because with your line of work, I can imagine that you deal with social media quite a lot and how people communicate through these channels. But increasingly, I've been hearing both from anecdotally from people in my circles, as well as from people who are kind of in the space, in sort of the marketing space or the communication strategy space, that there's a fatigue around Instagram and TikTok, and that the sort of original promise of connecting with friends isn't really being upheld anymore, and that there is this TikTokification that is just about seeing the most popular things that will get you hooked to just watch more and more content. And just the types of people that I've heard this fatigue from remind me of the moments when I heard people talking about new trends where then overall we started to head. And it's very anecdotal in my case, but I was wondering if you sense that as well, and if there is an adjustment in the work that you do, or if I'm, again, just in some very personalized social media bubble where my kind of thinking is being resonated to me, and it may or may not be real.
Yeah, I think there is a fatigue, and you know, we can't always blame the almighty dollar. It's how the world works. Like, it's how they make money. They're the largest ad companies in the world. It's more fascinating to me again here. So if I'm on Instagram, and even I don't know if you've ever done this, Thomas, where you just all of a sudden I feel like I just see one sponsored ad after another, and then you say I don't want to see this, and then I ask you, it's annoying. It's irrelevant. I've seen too many ads. I've already bought from this company. I can't remember what the choices are, but they're kind of the same. I'm always, what feedback loop is that going into? Is anybody actually listening to the bot? And then is anything actually ever going to change? Because I think that's the part of that is the crux of the feedback. And it kind of goes back to personalization. If you really, really, really want to win with me or you or anybody else or an influencer, um, that extreme listening and extreme like digital AI listening to the user, not just for ad serving purposes, but for experiential purposes. I'd be very curious to see where is that going to go, because that's the fatigue that I think people are just, they're just tired of being in the box that you think I'm supposed to be in. And then hopefully, you know, I think anywhere globally, especially in the US, it's always wonderful to see something born. out of that frustration. Necessity is the mother of invention. Hundreds and thousands of companies are born out of these moments where you're just tired of it. Want something different. And I have a feeling it won't be long. We're going to see something that's going to shake up the social media world. It'll happen.
Yeah, I can see that too. Very curious to see what it'll be, but yeah, feels like there's rumblings.
Yeah.
Um, Tim, is there a topic I should have asked about that I haven't asked about yet?
Oh, gosh, nothing I can think about. No, it's been delightful, really fun
Oh,
conversation. I don't get to do this
thank
as
you.
often just to go explore a bunch of topics on this level, but no, I think the thing would be just going back to what you said at the beginning, in the very beginning of the call. I think if there's um, the most powerful thing is still just to go back to the notion of giving and the human connection. So all technology aside, always encouraging people just to go find that moment, super small, tiniest of things, and just do it every day.
I love that as an ending, and yeah, and I truly found the Giving Wheel really inspiring in that level that it sort of both inspired action without putting pressure, and I think that's a really fine line to go. So I really appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time and giving me your time out of the day to have this really inspiring conversation. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, happy to do it, and thank you for the time.